thank you all for being here. Welcome to your last forum day and for joining us for this discussion of the resource landscape for journalism. And thanks to the IMED folks for having us. When I was here last year having a similar discussion on this stage, I don't think any of us could have imagined what the months ahead would bring. We all know the stories all too well, so I won't rehash them in detail since we have a limited amount of time, but suffice it to say, the loss of billions of dollars in US government funding, alongside the pivot or spend down of a lot of the key donors in our space, have created a persistent sense of scarcity and the most challenging environment I have ever seen in 25 years of doing this work as a fundraiser. So it's not your imagination, it's not you, it's really hard out there. But this work matters. What all of you do matters, and I contend that it's worth digging deep, getting creative, using all the skills that you employ as journalists to find our way through this. And to help us think about how we do that, we have a panel of some of the best in the business who can offer a snapshot of some of the different types of resources to help meet this moment, to help meet the information needs of the communities that you all serve. From impact investment to traditional philanthropy and everything in between. We'll have time for questions at the end, so please be thinking about them so we can have a robust discussion. We're here for you. Think of this as a bit of an ask me anything from people who spend a lot of time thinking about how to invest and give away money. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about your organization, what's your model, what's your mission, how do you operate, what types of investments do you make, if you do, and tell us a little bit about yourself personally and what's brought you to this work. Ides?
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Ides. I'm one of the founders and managing director of Journalism Fund Europe. And Journalism Fund Europe is a kind of intermediary. We are quite unique in Europe. We are set up to take money from donors and give it to journalists and media outlets. So we are an independent organization, non-profit, based in Brussels. So we have a mixed we have a mixed funding. We get money from the European Commission. We get money from donors and individuals. We have a budget this year of 6 million euros, and also for next year, I can already say that we have a budget of 6 million. So the core reason of our existence is the firewall. So we take the money from donors who want to support journalism and media, and we make sure that this is without any risk for them, and we give it to journalists and media, and so that it's without any risk for the journalists and the media, because it's a risky business. So we have grant programs for, and this is quite special, we have grant programs for media, we have grant programs for journalists, we have a combination. You can, as a journalist, also collaborate with the media outlet. We focus on Europe, but in many of our grant programs, people from outside Europe and the EU can also apply. It depends a bit on the donor. If the donor is the European Commission, then it's narrowed down Europe than if it's from a private donor. The main donors are Arcadia and the European Commission. This is growing. And we have a few main grant programs that I want to mention here that is open also for the people who are here, is our environmental grant program. We have two things there. First of all, for the journalists and media, we have every 3 months a call. This is already running 5 years now, and it's for environmental investigations. We have every call 400,000 to distribute, so 1.6 million a year for media and journalists focusing on European topics, meaning interested for the public, because Journalism Fund is set up by citizens. We really work for them more than we work for journalists and media, sorry to say, but we have the same goal. And we have also the other grant program is environmental investigative journalism for organizations who wants to do trainings for journalists, that's for individual media organizations, non-profit organizations who are in the field of journalism. And now also we have a European cross-border grant program that is there already since 2008. And so the next call is in January. And there we have 5 calls, and this is supported by the main donor is the European Commission, and it's also again focused on cross-border investigative journalism. But besides that, we have also trainings for small media outlets. It's called Mini MBA that is organized by Riga. We will select 20 media outlets to give them a training in businesses. So besides that, we have also money, but not at the moment. There's no call open. We hope to do it again. The last 2 years, we supported already 90 media outlets to give them some money to 40,000, 50,000 euros for innovation. So we're looking for the small media outlets, and also we are targeting the local media. Those who never applied, they are very welcome. We have a potential. You can call us, you can talk to us before you apply. So don't hesitate to annoy us.
Thank you. Yeah, always appreciate that kind of accessibility. Thank you, Ides. Crystal?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Crystal Logan. I'm the co-executive director at the Reverend David Logan Foundation. We are a US foundation, a family foundation based out of Chicago. We fund in 3 main areas: journalism, social justice, and the arts. Geographically, we fund in Europe, Latin America, and North America. We fund across the spectrum in the media ecosystem, to be honest. We fund national, regional outlets, we fund freelancers, documentary filmmakers, training, symposia, and also the protection of whistleblowers. We have an open LOI process on our website, so it's very accessible. Anyone can apply. And we provide strategic transformational grants. That's what we look for: organizations who are really on the bleeding edge. We fund excellence. What we are looking for are excellent organizations doing work in the journalism field. I think it's important to mention why we fund, because I think that's something that's really important. We fund because we do believe that journalism is really the surest protection of our democracy and of our freedom. And we are currently living in a time where there are no guardrails. It's the time of the big lie, and we believe that we need to continue funding efficiently and consistently in journalism.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I am the only one here that is not a funder, but the mistake that a lot of people make around the name of my organization is that they often call us Global Fund for Media Development. We are the Global Forum. We bring people together. And I am Mira Milosevic, Executive Director of GFMD. We are a network of more than 220 organizations from around 70 countries around the world. And I have a feeling this year somehow that after 20 years of existing, it seems as if we were set up for this very moment. Because the challenges are so hard that no single organization on its own can, tilt the balance or even move that goalpost even a little bit. And so we draw on that collective power by doing 3 groups of things together. So we do collective policy and advocacy for journalism support and media development. And so we, for instance, lobbied at regional level, and some of us, Ides and Bilal, come from organizations that are members, have made sure that, for instance, many of you are funded by IJ4EU, that program would not come into existence if there wasn't persistence, year-long lobbying at the EU level. We do that with some countries like Brazil. We worked with the government and our members to advise setting up journalism fund, and we do a lot of things at the UN level. We have representative status. So we bring organizations around the world and we open the doors for them to represent their communities, but we also channel those voices to those debates. The second thing that we do, we used to say we do coordination of funders, donors, and those who support media in different regions. But now it's mostly crisis. It's not even coordination, it's comparing notes, making sure the little resources that our community has, for instance, in Palestine, Ukraine, in Sudan, in Yemen, is not wasted, and that at least people know what each others are doing. But most of the time we also compare where that investment makes impact and what is the largest needs and where the gaps. So we work very deliberately and carefully to facilitate those conversations, to again give voices to participants and our members from the ground. And then the third thing that we do is we try to harness our collective power, not only nowadays in policy, but we're trying to see where as a community, for instance, in fundraising, we can inform and create better practices, but also kind of push for that different approach to fundraising. So for instance, we have facilitated conversations and now Reporters Without Borders with our Ukrainian members and partners for the first time have incorporated support for media in the recovery and reconstruction processes, for instance, in Ukraine. And so we're looking at those unusual things where actually journalism can be positioned and needs to be positioned. The other thing that I'll talk about later is we're looking at collective power, for instance, of investigative journalism organizations when it comes to tech infrastructure and tech stack, and a lot of money is being spent there. So how can we as a community actually position ourselves as a big collective powerful purchaser and maybe even owner of some critical infrastructure layers for small journalism organizations. So I'll stop there, but we can go into details.
Thank you. And it's so important to have that kind of coordination when the resources are so constrained. So grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least. So I'm with MDIF, the Media Development Investment Fund. I think you see it up there. And we, for the last almost 30 years now, have been doing debt and equity financing for independent media. So that simply put, our model is we give you a loan, we need it to be repaid with interest. We make an investment, we need to make a return on that investment. And I mean, I don't know how it's been over the last 30 years, but these days when I explain this to people who work in media, they're like, what? How does this work? I can say, I mean, there's a lot more detail to get into, but we've got we've had 150 clients in almost 50 countries around the world. And we push this idea of, for the newsrooms to be independent, for news organizations to maintain the independence, they need to be financially independent. And you do that by having a business plan, by having diversified revenue streams, one of which can, and these days I guess should be grants, but your approach to this needs to be, I guess the value that MDF brings to our clients is all the non-editorial stuff, the stuff where, for the last 30 years, with the investment professionals, but also our network of clients, and creating this community where, everybody learns and benefits from each other, have also pushed us more towards focusing on two things very strongly today, and this is better coordination, not just across the media we work with, but generally, and I think for me, being at events like this is great. So it's the coordination and better communication. And the third C I want to throw in there before I end is competition, because I think many times we find, and this is small and big, independent media look at other independent media as competition, when the real competition are those that are not independent, those outside with bad intentions, who are well organized, who are well funded, and who are well coordinated. And yes, definitely when it comes to business and running media businesses, we are competing, and that has a place, but we are stronger when we better coordinate and, lift each other together. And then the final thing that we do is, over the last several years, we've realized that we can't wait for media organizations to reach the point where the level of risk for us to take an investment or to make a loan is sufficient. So we run these Amplify programs, working closely with many partners in different countries. And the simple way to explain this is this last mile. So organizations that have made a lot of progress, that have a clear path to growth but are experiencing some challenges, is with our intervention, we can help get them over that last hurdle where they'll be able to qualify for an investment or a loan. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think this is a really interesting kind of snapshot of what the resource landscape looks like, right? The different kind of revenue streams you can think about as you're putting together your own business plan as a news organization or as a media development organization. And it really points to the importance, I think, of being really strategic and thoughtful about mapping out what that looks like and not being over-reliant on any one source. I'm a major gift specialist. I work with my clients on foundations and high net worth individual relationships, providing those, large multi-year grants. But, I can say from many clients' experience and what we're seeing in the space now, live by the high net worth individual, die by the high net worth individual, right? They decide that their interest is, African tigers, and you're screwed. What are the different types of revenue we can think about? There's, memberships and subscriptions. There's other types of earned revenue like events or consulting or selling data. There's investment. There's fellowships. There are sponsorship revenue. I'm curious from the rest of these panelists, what does sustainability, a word that is thrown around an awful lot in our space, but what does that look like to the groups that you work with, the groups that you invest in?
Looking at Bilal, he's a specialist.
Okay, I'll respond with two things that we see often. The one is this idea that, you mentioned memberships or events. So I think a mistake that is often witnessed is this, and it's because and I say we as journalists are smart people. We are often the smartest people in a room like this, I'm not sure. But generally we are the smartest people, and I think that becomes the speed bump to our progress, because we think, great, so-and-so organization is doing great with memberships. We can do memberships, of course we can. High five each other, we invest a lot of money into doing memberships, and then 6 months down the line we realize we've wasted a ton of money, distracted ourselves, and we didn't do proper planning, we didn't set targets. And so I think my response to this question is, I don't know. You know for your organization, and if you don't, you would need to figure that out yourselves. Yes, engage with others, learn from others' experiences. I think often we don't talk enough to our audiences, and this might be something from the way journalism evolved, is we always spoke at audiences, and we broadcast to them, or we broadcast. But these days, we need to think about our audiences more as our customers. And again, the purist in the room would be, rolling their eyes at that comment. But I say it in terms of, you need to understand what value they're getting from you. Because this is the thing, is if the audiences aren't getting that value, and that value is, the context behind the story, whatever it is, then they're going to leave you or not support you. And often we make this assumption, and I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, should we do, like merchandise and perks and, these sort of things? Maybe somebody wants a cap or a hoodie with your logo on it, but maybe they want access to your newsroom, or, maybe they want the ability to engage in different ways. So having that conversation. Okay, and then I guess this is not answering the question, but it's the flip side, is we often focus on sustainability as like, how do we make more money? But looking at our expenses on the cost side, I think, is often the easiest thing to do when you're looking at the question of how do we become more sustainable? What are the things that we're spending money on that we haven't looked at and carefully checked whether we're getting the return on, for each dollar we're spending, are we getting $1 back in return in value? If not, maybe there's difficult decisions to be made in cutting out sections of the work that we're doing, not because we don't think it's important, but because we need sustainability in order to be around in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time. And sometimes those are difficult decisions to make.
I would touch on something there, and I think at this time, at this moment, one of the most important things is self-awareness. Organizations having self-awareness and being critical, looking at themselves and really thinking, okay, we need to evolve. We need to figure out how to, it's a phrase, but meet this moment. And I think this is not about funders looking for the next shiny thing. I've heard that a lot. That's not what this is about. But funders are looking for organizations to evolve and to show that they understand that there are new challenges, there are new things that are happening. And I think sustainability for me at this moment also is looking at your organization and understanding, yes, you may have wonderful, excellent journalistic output, but there's another issue. You also have to have the other side, the organizational structure. And as a funder, we're looking now at sustainable organizations as being those who are fully featured, who they've figured out what their back office means, what their marketing means, what their HR means, because this is a business. And I think to be sustainable, we have to look more at organizations in this space as a business.
Yeah, and the first step is always to look at your legal entity. We also look at it to gain trust. You need to put all the legal documents on your website. Be transparent, because you are in the transparency business. So to create trust towards your audience, I think it's important that you put on your website who the owners are, how you get your money, where the money is coming from. These kind of elements are very important, not only for the audience, but also for potential investments, for potential donors. So this is the basic. The basic is administration. You need a very strong, smart administration. Point one.
I have to speak from the perspective of our members, and especially those in countries that are undergoing decline of democratic institutions, authoritization, and all kinds of negative tendencies. And so, those who are what we would call sustainable, they have some reserve in place, they have structures. They're not smart. They're Leonardos of a current contemporary media scene, because it's incredibly difficult. So one of the revenue mixes over the last 10 years that a lot of smaller journalism, local community organizations have developed had grant giving as part of that revenue mix. And it was, somewhere 50% and more of their revenue mix, but for most of the organizations, it didn't go under 20–25%. Even the biggest global organizations have been applying for grants for reporting on environment and some other issues that are not the beats that were profitable. And so what has happened over the last year or so is that that part of the revenue mix for many has disappeared. And that has happened also in the conditions where, for instance, I can talk about Serbia. Some of the best journalism organizations have been developing side businesses like events, even buying houses where a couple of organizations would do their programs together. But, the mayor of Belgrade is suing them. And so they never got a building permit for that building. And that goes on and on and on. So even the best business plans and ideas, in some of the countries, the tax authorities are after you. In other countries, there are slaps, lawsuits. In third countries, you don't have, access to, any kind of distribution. So it's really, really tough wherever you look. And so looking at the business model at the moment from our perspective is looking at how do you connect those organizations and see what are those joint services. So you look at the cost side as well. What is those joint services and joint infrastructure where they could collaborate? But now, it's also kind of where are those joint potential for creating revenue. We heard yesterday about the funnel, how The Economist, how El País, how 404 develop their funnels. And so, for instance, we had yesterday Gaza Project here won an award. They had audience of 34 million people globally. And so you have the best experience of collaboration across borders and organizations to create content. There is also great experience in how to distribute it. But then there is no funnel, how you actually engage those audiences to actually transform that into some kind of income, to transform it into engagement with advertisers, and have some system as well to share costs long-term between those organizations and not project by project in the infrastructure field. So those are the things that are coming up at the moment with these scarce resources.
Thanks. I think what's important to note here and what's important to take away from this is how nuanced thinking about sustainability really needs to be. I think that in, kind of discussions, in, your pitch materials, in, even in business planning or in conversations with donors or investors, it tends to be this sort of shorthand for either growth or, diversifying your revenue stream, sort of weaning yourself off like one major donor or, one being over-reliant on one type of funding. And what it really is it requires real nuance and sort of self-awareness and planning. It's not something that you can just kind of make up or fall into. It really requires, especially in this environment, a lot of thought. And I think the points about collaboration are really important, right? What are the opportunities for shared services, for working together, for mutual aid in our communities that are going to get us through this moment of actual financial scarcity? If we can touch briefly on just those, how you think about those different types of revenue streams and which ones to pursue, like what advice would you give to somebody who's kind of deciding whether to reach out to a foundation or a funder, to cultivate an investor, to apply for a fellowship? What are some of the hallmarks that you look for in kind of assessing that opportunity cost? How do entrepreneurs kind of calculate that return on investment of time and effort in pursuing certain funding resources?
Mine's a short answer. I think we're in a room full of journalists. Do your homework. Investigate your funders. Figure out, are they really a funder for you? And don't try to, figure out what is a funder's mission? And does it align with my mission? Would I feel comfortable getting funding from that organization? And if it doesn't fit, there's a reason. Don't push it, don't waste your time, don't go through a 20, 40-page application. It's just not worth it. And I think that's probably the most important thing. I'm always surprised about the amount of organizations who approach us who really are just not aligned, or potentially they are looking for funds for another region, which unfortunately we're not able to give them. The other thing is you can ask your funders, if you do manage to get that hour on Zoom or 45 minutes on Zoom, and you realize that your missions are not aligned, that's okay. Ask your funders, well, what do you think? Do you know any other funders who may be more aligned to what I'm doing? Do you have any thoughts about the work that I'm doing?
So, we have to always agree with the funders. No, I'm kidding. So number one, it's not easy, right? Nothing is going to be easy. And I'm going to now, this next point, base it on the conversations I've had over the last day and a half. And so it might not apply to everyone, but there's lots of small organizations here that are either led by journalists alone or by people who used to be journalists and are taking over leadership of organization. And I've been reflecting of that over, some of the most successful clients we've had, and a common ingredient you see is that ability to have a strong co-leader, where one person is focusing on, leading the newsroom, focusing on the editorial, and the other, they might be a journalist, but they're very clearly taking the role of saying, okay, we're going to focus on the strength of the organization. So I might not be a financial person, I might not have a, investment background, but I'm taking this responsibility on, And I think that's important because when it comes to the questions you are asking, do you approach a funder, do you approach an investor, do you open up a new revenue stream? That requires proper planning and investment, and you need to have the resources. So, don't invest time into a 40-page application if the return is not going to be worth if it's not going to be worth the return. But I think two things are true at the same time. It's like you can do your preparation and you can be well prepared, but we do look around us and we say, there's some bad practices that we witness where an organization that is terrible is getting lots of financial support, and they're getting support from everyone. And yes, we should call that out, but we also need to look closer and to say, maybe in some cases the funders are lazy. And they're going to go for the easy option because this organization, this foundation supported them, so they must be good, so we'll support them. And so there is some of that, but we don't design our entire strategies around that. But we also can't ignore the fact that that exists and how that impacts how we plan our plans.
I'll talk about some of the work we at GFMD have done with our members and partners. We want to democratize fundraising and funding in a way that not those who are the best at writing the proposals get the grants, and those who have access to different capitals or funds for travel, but those who actually have the best teams and best ideas to report on the most crucial issues of the day. So we have developed something called Fundraising Guide in 7 languages, and it's for free and it's out there. And we have received a lot of positive and constructive feedback. We are now reviewing where to go from here with that. So one of the things that we are thinking about is collecting and anonymizing different successful applications and less successful applications, and maybe creating some LLM learning model that can actually be of service to community, that the only thing actually that will differentiate you is your idea and not your access to people who are very good at writing proposals. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to kill your business, but that's really important. And the other thing that we've done at the same time on the policy level, we have fought very hard for 3 years at the OECD, where all the major institutional governmental donors are sitting, to develop the first standard document that is recommending and requiring donors to follow certain best practices. And that has been adopted and signed by all the governments that sit, I think it's 34, and give some kind of a donor assistance to democratization, human rights, and journalism. This is something that also we would like to do with private funders, so that when you see the practice that is not ethical and is maybe doing harm, you can react. And also we're developing a toolkit for delegations and for embassies, or maybe even for private funders, how to actually now do this in practice. But any ideas you have, how to also assist you with this going forward, we are always open to suggestion. I have more about policy at a higher level, but I'll do that later.
One small thing. There's more money for project funding, also within Journalism Fund, than for core funding. That's already a problem. So we receive 1,000, this year already 1,125 applications of 2,000 media and journalists. Only 370 receive money, so you know how hard it is. Only 1/3 we can support. But one thing I should also mention is the fact that you can collaborate not only on the journalistic level, but maybe also on the business level. And this is what some are already trying to do. You have the reference circle. That's now, Peter, you have to pay me a beer. And also other organizations already starting to collaborate on the business level. And there are so many things that you can do together and join forces and become more powerful thanks to using the same server, the same thinking about marketing and sharing a marketeer, these kind of things. So you can cut on your cost level by collaborating too.
Can I just mention, it's interesting, what Bilal said about funders being lazy. Yes, there are lazy funders. Some. But there are a lot of funders who do the work. There are a lot of funders who do this work because we truly care about this ecosystem. We truly care about making a difference in society. And I think it's important to look at what Ides says. The amount of applications, there is a very finite amount of resources. And the amount of applications that we receive and having to allocate a budget which it's a really, really difficult decision-making process. So yes, there may be a perception that's, that some funders are lazy, but it's also a difficult balance and process.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the decisions on the investment side, the work on the investment side is as difficult as our job on the fundraising side all the time. So I want to get to audience questions next, but one question for all of you to weigh in on is, what has changed for you, if anything? How do you balance the sort of urgent needs that have cropped up with the sort of ongoing ones that we've long had in this sector? How are you kind of thinking about what this moment means for you?
I can go first. You had in the first question a kind of a personal question for us. What keeps us in this job? And for me, I love looking at the numbers and follow the money. In journalism, at the moment, there's not a lot of it. In terms of the fundraising and funding, what has changed is that we had around $600 million globally per year going into independent journalism. Now, I think at a stretch, we would get to 300, out of which probably 150 million ends up in local journalism organizations. On a good day, on a good year, around 40 million will end up in investigative journalism organizations, which is really far away from being sufficient for all the stories and all the organizations. So what we are looking at is how do you harness some of the the markets out there. So out of those 40 million, we've done a really good survey around how much organizations are spending on cloud services, infrastructure and services. And we came up that only 20 that we audited spent $2 million. And around 70% of that was going to big tech for paying your storage of data, processing, for big investigations like in Panama Papers, Pandora Papers, and others. You had 7, terabytes of data that needed unpacking. That's extremely expensive. So we are setting up something called Journalism Cloud Alliance, where we are trying to create a system that would provide a collective, federated structure of accessible and affordable clouds, and then to connect all of you who create solutions specifically designed for investigations, data processing, identity verifications, and other tools that are necessary. I know that our colleagues from OCCRP are also looking at what are the ways to monetize some of the processes and data, and others are creating data coalitions and alliances to see where are the models that can actually bring some revenue to this world. And finally, I know I'm taking a lot of time, we have created policy openings for more funding, especially for investigative journalism. There is a process called Finance for Development that is reforming international investment and development institutions, including development banks and other structures. And there is a sentence in one of the outcome documents adopted in July that says, countries commit to support journalist organizations and civil society that are uncovering illicit financial flows. Now we are working on a structure and collecting all the voices that can work with us to actually push countries and push institutions to have a percentage for investigative journalism attached to big development and infrastructure projects. So those are some of the things.
What has changed? Well, welcome to 2025. I think everything has changed, and this is a moment where we have to wake up, and there are unprecedented attacks on philanthropy, and this is not just US philanthropy. We've all seen what's happening with the new administration and OSF, but this is happening in the US, it's happening in Europe, it's happening all over the world, and I think there are really unprecedented pressures upon philanthropy, which philanthropy has never had to deal with before. And so I think that is one of the things that we need to recognize. I think one of the ways that we're having to do that, because there's such a limited pot of resources, is we continue to fund, and we continue to fund heavily, but we are looking at which organizations are resilient and which organizations are going to be able to weather the storm. And I think that's something that's really important. We tell a lot of our European, US organizations, look to the Global South. The Global South has been working with a smaller amount of resources for a long time. And I think this is something that going forward is really how our approach to looking at sustainability and feasibility of organizations has changed. But I would like to say one thing, that what hasn't changed is that there's still excellent journalism being produced. There's still journalism that makes a difference being produced. And we will continue to fund, because I think at this time when it's so difficult, and as we slip into the pit of fascism in the United States and around Europe, this is a moment when we believe as a funder that the courage of journalists really deserves courage. And that's one of the things that I think hasn't changed. But I'll pass it to Bilal, I'm curious.
Well, I think a lot's been covered. What's happened this year, in a way, for us has been not surprising insofar as it hasn't really changed anything for us. So again, I'm saying we wouldn't normally say this, but it's a specific question, is most of our clients, compared to their peers in the industries and in the markets in which they operate, have not been so negatively affected. And I say this because this is like what we've been preaching for the longest time, is to say, no one, regardless of how well-intentioned that one supporter you have is, it's objectively a bad idea to be so dependent on them. And so, in this crisis, for us, it's actually been an opportunity where, responding to your point, where everyone's looking around and saying, what should we do differently? And in that way, and I think this is maybe something in the future I'll regret, but MDIF doesn't have competition. Yes, we have competition in the sense of maybe in a small market you can go and get a businessman to be, again, a good businessman to be an investor and be a supporter. But generally, there is a lot of activity in the philanthropy and grant space, and not as much in the pure business. Is this, the 1, 2, 3 is the ABCs of what make a good business. And so why that's been interesting, it's opening up more interest from individuals, institutional investors, everyone saying, okay, what role can we play? Yes, I want to be, a member through a membership program, but beyond that, what can I do?
It's not always the strongest who will survive. It's, I think, the person or the organization who is flexible enough and can adapt and look what's happening and can change his organization in a way that it will survive. I'm very hopeful, or maybe I'm naive, but if I look back in time, that was also your question, if something has changed. When in Eastern Europe, before 1989, it was impossible to do investigative journalism, or it was under the line. This is now more than ever possible, and I see also that a lot of journalists, they complained that they couldn't do investigative journalism in their own traditional media outlet. What they did is they stepped out of that media outlet and they started their own media outlet. And if you see how many media outlets now focusing only on investigative journalism that popped up, it's amazing. So investigative journalism is alive as never before, although of course that's also the problem.
More competition than ever before, yeah.
There are so many, you need a lot of money, so that's also, I think, but I have never calculated it, that there is a lot of money in the field. It's a question to put it it should be more, of course, but to put it in the right places. So I wanted to give also a kind of positive vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if you want to lean into the sort of optimistic implications of this moment, it is a huge teachable moment for donors, for organizations. It is resilience and creativity that will carry folks through this. And I think it speaks to being really thoughtful about all those aspects of your business plan and, really what donors or investors don't need to hear is, the sort of like crying poverty, we're desperate, because they're hearing that from everybody. It's just not a competitive message. What is your plan in this moment? What are you doing? How are you planning to see yourself through this and make an impact and serve your community? I think those are the important things to kind of double down on communicating to your donors, and an important kind of thing to educate your audiences, the investment community about in this moment. Questions from the audience? Right down in front.
Thank you. My name is Nelly, and I work with the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism. Some of you know it. We're really small, about 11 people, and constantly afraid of not having money. We are a non-profit. So I do have 2 questions, and I'll be quick with it because I know there'll be many questions. One is to Crystal, and the other is to Mira. My question to Mira is really from naivety. I don't understand what this funnel is, because many newsrooms like mine live from project to project. Some of them we get from Journalism Fund. Europe, we never from MDIF because we are a non-profit. But I'm thinking about that. And I really want to understand what this, you talked about a funnel system. Most newsrooms live project to project, but should have that. And to Crystal, you described what you're looking for in a newsroom are newsrooms that aren't exactly doing the usual, and we aren't. But I want to know what exactly, if you could give me 3 points of what you're looking for, if you saw that a small newsroom like ours would have that would make us competitive for some money from the Logan Foundation, that would be something I'd like to leave here with. Thank you.
I could try to explain it, but I would really ask you to look at the session that was here yesterday. There were colleagues from The Economist, El País, and 404, and they went into detail of what they do, how they meet their audiences, especially now with the AI, diminishing the number of audiences that come through search, what's happening in social media, where do you meet them, how do you bring them to your distribution channels, how do you recruit them to become your supporters, and that's something that Bilal was talking about. There is a whole science around at the moment. What do you do, where do you do it, how do you create that flow of where do you meet customers, how do you bring them in, how do you keep them, how do you retain loyalty. So it was a very, very interesting session. Maybe take a look at that. They know much, much more about it than I do.
The solution.
No, it's a really difficult thing, and we talk a lot about this as a team. What is the special sauce? What is the special ingredient that we are looking for with grantees? And it's a really difficult thing to answer because we fund so many different things. And I think it's going to be a terrible answer for you, but I think one of the things, and we can talk about it afterwards, but I think one of the things is we have a saying in the foundation, which is you know it when you see it, and there's I think there needs to be strong leadership. There needs to be excellent journalism. There needs to be a plan, which, plans can change, and that's fine. But there needs to be a runway, an idea of how you're going to get to the next stage. And I think most importantly than ever, we are looking for how the work that you're doing is truly engaging people and making a difference. And that sounds very, very simplistic, but I think there's a disconnect between sometimes the journalism that we're doing and the people that it affects most. So that's one of the things that we're looking for is does this organization really understand where they're going and how they plan to get there? Because there is no one-fits-all solution to this.
Yeah, and I think your questions are sort of interrelated. I think one of the challenges and sort of limitations of collaborative journalism, as exciting as it is it gives you enormous reach, right? You can reach tens of millions of audiences. When I worked with ICIJ, we would tell donors all the time, it's like, we could never raise enough money to buy the number of column inches that we get when, all 60 partners run a story on the same day. So it's enormous reach. The catch is none of those are your audience members, right? And so figuring out how you connect with them, how you monetize them, whether that's philanthropically or through membership or subscription, those are all the challenges that are associated with it. And so I think to the point about kind of sustainability and success, it's like, what do you do once you've gone, once you've partnered with 60 outlets to publish that story? What's the net for you, right? We had a question here in the second row. Peter.
Thank you very much. Peter Matjasic, representing Reference, was mentioned by Ides. Thank you for the airtime. So a lot of the panel has been discussing, and I'm very grateful for that, the importance of resilience, sustainability, but also co-leadership and focusing on the non-editorial, right? So a lot of people here, and Reference represents public interest media organizations, journalist organizations and newsrooms, where basically it was what Ides said, journalists left legacy media and created their new thing to do what they wanted and what they do best, so holding power to account. However, they don't necessarily have, or didn't have at the moment, when they started it, the skills that it takes to run a business. So I just came out of a co-leadership relationship that Bilal was talking about, and I was the non-journalist in that, so I did appreciate bringing that perspective into it. And within Reference, it was created almost 5 years ago with the premise of you have the spaces to talk about collaborative journalism, you don't have spaces to talk about non-editorial. Or, as we like to call it, how do I get shit done? How do I manage my team? How do I care about well-being? How do I do fundraising? How do I do half of the things that this panel has been discussing? My question to you, however, is there's very little interest or funding available for a structure like Reference itself to be able to hold that space for it. So I'm asking for advice in terms of what kind of narrative should be focusing on in terms of what is in 25 the right wording to explain to funders who might be interested in helping us hold that space to be able to actually allow people to meet and have this magic happen on a person-to-person level, because we have experienced as examples impact of how one newsroom, ERP, learned from another to start membership program, or how one local media learned from a very big organization, the Bureau, about doing certain things. So any advice on how we could fund such an infrastructure? Thank you very much.
I have just a small remark. Peter is asking advice to donors. This is a smart one. If you ask for advice, you maybe get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. But don't ask always money to donors. I think there is a lot of knowledge and they can give a lot of advice. So this is a good one. But to answer your question, we try to find money to support organizations like yours, but it's a difficult one. We try to find the core funding also to support media outlets. That's also a difficult one. So there is still a lot of work to do in that direction towards donors. There's a lot of money available, but we can't convince them at the moment, the donors. This is what we have to do. All together, we have to say why it's so necessary today and use this crisis maybe to convince them, to say, hey guys, we need more money. We need also money to develop our business more than ever before. I'm dropping it in your direction now.
I think there is there has been a tide change in the way that funders are looking at journalism. They realize that they can't just fund journalism. They can't just fund the editorial side of it. They can't just fund the production side. There's a whole other part of it. And you can definitely see that with an influx of money into the protection of journalists, safety. There's a lot of money going in at the moment to training. And so I think it's a little bit of it's a difficult one because it's priorities. And I think at the moment, as all organizations are having a little bit of an existential crisis, and we all are as people, it's also, in the funding world, trying to figure out what is the best next step. And it's important to say, what is the best next step, but also to continue funding. So I think there is a movement, and I think there is momentum to understand that the back office and that the infrastructure it's not as important, but it is getting to be as important as the other side.
I mean, I am asking the same question because I'm in the same boat, and what we argue is that, for instance, if you compare the structure that exists in the US to support small local organizations like Institute for Nonprofit News, Lion Publishers, and other different initiatives around different states, you can see that on average, the small organization in US gets around, $200,000 from different funders, because all these systems have worked to create the ecosystem and to bring more money and to make that ecosystem more professional. The situation in the UK, where that didn't exist, is on average the organizations get 60,000. And so there is a drastic difference. What we are arguing is that if we don't have capacity to go and raise money for the ecosystem, not only from usual suspects, but extend that both in philanthropy and internationally, and spend days and months in convoluted discussions around new European multi-annual financial framework to make sure that these budget lines actually are there and that there is funding going forward, there will be less and less capacity of funders to fund journalism. So it's a chicken and egg situation. Everyone is suffering. So yeah, that's my pitch.
If I may add, and then, sorry, for Peter, you should send all your members to that MBA, mini MBA. It's not interesting for your network, but at least for your members.
So I mean, a lot's been said, but if I can add very quickly, number one is, and I think I said this, it's not easy. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It's not going to be easy. We know it's not going to be easy. But number two, it's also not unique, right? Yes, we are very focused on media, journalism, our industry. And maybe in some markets we're comparing better economies. But I've been operating as a South African and in many African countries. Like, business is hard across whatever industry, whatever business you're trying to do. But then the third is we are making progress. Yes, it's not as fast as we would like to see, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. And I think what we need more of is to call out. So what we see often in many African countries is you get this support parachuted in, and you're going to train 100 journalists or train 100 student newsrooms, and there's this disconnect between where the support is going and where's that need, and we can't always, unless we're united and we better organized and better coordinated, to go back to my opening line, we can't call it out. And also there's this thing where, and again, so final point is, there's many organizations that would get a grant, and if they succeed, they won't get the next grant. Because, you've opened up a new revenue stream, you're doing okay. And so what that does is we reward failure. It's like, you've gotten a grant, you tried to do something, you failed, we'll give you another grant. But those who are effective and efficient and actually succeed, then don't get the necessary support. It's not always the case, but this is the atmosphere within which we're operating. So, yes, good luck.
Good luck indeed, yes. Do we have time for one more question? Row here.
Hi, I'm Priyanka Raval. I'm work for the Bristol Cable. We're lucky enough to receive Logan funding, which I think has been transformational in becoming, a newsroom that started 10 years ago out of a living room to an organization that can stand on its own 2 feet. We have a member model, so 60% of our money comes through membership, 40% through grant funding. We'd like to become totally funded by our members. I think what I've really appreciated about Logan funding in particular, maybe in hindsight, not at the time, is the insistence on focusing on becoming self-reliant, whether that's through finding other grants for match funding or, the challenge that we were set of raising 60 grand in membership income in a year, which we did actually manage to do, and that has made a huge, that was really helpful in progressing us to be self-reliant. My question is a bit related to Peter's question and other people who've been asking about networks, is that increasingly I feel that for Bristol and the local journalism scene, the independent local journalism scene that I'm operating in, our success, the continued success of the cable will be really helped by the collective success of local journalism in the UK. And I have been exploring ideas with other people about whether there is a way to centralize some of those back office operations and share it, whether that's developing digital infrastructure or maybe literal infrastructure. Like we've been looking at the idea of whether buying a building is a way that, having an asset is a way to solidify the infrastructure of local journalism. So yeah, I think what's the question here is maybe where is the potential to look at funding and exploring some of those ideas to build infrastructure that we can all share and benefit from, so that we're not all approaching individually with different varying levels of business sense or operational know-how or HR capacity. If we actually build it so that everybody can participate from it already, and then what we're asking for funders is more, just maybe some money to invest in things that will yield revenue streams and reward success.
So I can go, sorry, I can go quickly, and maybe I'm not answering the question, which is a possibility. But okay, so the point I want to make is there needs to be more consolidation, and this is like bringing in like a more traditional business concept. Is if in your case there's other similar type of organizations who that are either smaller, then maybe go and try and acquire them or take a stake in them or vice versa. This is often difficult when you set up as a non-profit, and this is a question that's come up. What is the model? There is no model, but what we see often is this hybrid model of having a non-profit and a sister for-profit organization, and nobody starts a for-profit in media to make money. You use the vehicle of a for-profit entity for strategic reasons after having done all the things we spoke about, having a plan, doing your research, making sure you have enough resources. But my point was there needs to be more consolidation, and that could be a whole conference or discussion on its own.
And the other thing I would say is, there are some really interesting models for this in the United States, like Tiny News Collective, for example. And Institute for Nonprofit News, to some degree, is doing some of that. There's shared services, and then you're seeing like community foundations in the U.S. supporting things like fractional COOs or HR departments for kind of a cluster of regional news organizations. So it's something that, is kind of an emerging pitch, and it's definitely, hard to explain, and it's not kind of mainstream yet, but I do think that there are donors that are thinking along those routes.
And the Journalism Fund is also looking in that direction. We are also convinced that we should support local media. For us, that's a very important one, bottom up, and we see a lot of those small media outlets. They are the laboratories for democracy, and we should support them. We are looking at the direction of the European Commission. The Parliament is convinced. I hope the rest will also be convinced also to support small media outlets and local media in the future. We did already 2 years. We already had a grant program. We hope to have one in the coming years. So we are really convinced that this is one of the directions we should go.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for letting us run a few minutes over. Thanks, everybody, for your questions.